Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin is steering the BRICS nations through a crisis triggered by US President Donald Trump's tariffs. In the last 24 hours, Putin held talks with Prime Minister Modi, Xi Jinping and Ramaphosa as they unite along with Brazil to counter US trade aggression. The talks come ahead of Putin's meeting with the US President in Alaska next Friday. According to reports, the Kremlin said that the Russian President Putin, in his phone call with Indian Prime Minister Modi, discussed Ukraine and talks held with US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. While thanking Putin for his detailed assessment, Prime Minister Modi reiterated India's consistent position for peaceful resolution of the war in Ukraine. The leaders have also reviewed progress in bilateral agenda and have reaffirmed their commitment to further deepen the special and privileged strategic partnership between India and Russia. Inviting Putin to India, Prime Minister Modi said that he is looking forward to hosting him later this year. According to India's Ministry of External Affairs, Prime Minister Modi invited Putin for 23rd India-Russia Annual Summit. Earlier, Prime Minister Modi held talks with Brazil's President Lula da Silva on US trade tariffs. Both leaders agreed to enhance cooperation in trade, energy, defense and other areas as US tariffs on Brazilian goods jumped to 50%. Putin also dialed his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping to update him on the latest US-Russia talks with the war in Ukraine. According to reports, Xi Jinping expressed support for a long-term solution to the conflict. Ahead of the phone call, China slammed Trump's steep tariffs on India over Russian oil purchase, calling it a clear case of tariff abuse while urging restraint. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa also held a telephone conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin on the Ukraine war and further deepening bilateral ties. After speaking to Putin, he spoke with his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky on the peace process between Russia and Ukraine. This comes as the US president has imposed a 30% tariff on South African nation. Each reaching out to regional allies, Russian President Putin held talks with Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko on US peace proposal plans as well. For more on this, we're now being joined live by Rafael Ayores from Brazil. He is Professor of Latin American History and Politics and a Brazilian foreign policy analyst. Thank you so much for joining us on World DNA.
My pleasure.
Now, of course, what we're seeing playing out here, Trump's usual tactic of pressuring allies, and this has sort of resulted in a realignment of the BRICS partners. They are now coming together and they are opposing the US president's tariff policies. How do you assess this entire situation?
It is actually an opportunity, I would say, for the BRICS to actually institutionalize a little more their cooperation, which has been happening for a while now. The BRICS nations already just had a meeting in Rio a few weeks ago, and around that meeting, early in July, President Trump had a very strong statement against the BRICS, against the idea that nations on the global south, which are the main nations, composing the main members of the BRICS, the founding members of the BRICS, and now adding a few new members, that they would no longer be taking lead or taking orders, to be more blunt, from the global north, especially from the United States. So, yes, it's a challenging moment. The United States is playing very hardball against many countries in the world, particularly countries that are the founding members of the BRICS, such as Brazil, India, South Africa, as your piece just mentioned. But I see this as actually an interesting opportunity for them to actually maybe institutionalize a little more their efforts, to act a little more together. Of course, this is not an easy effort. If it were easy, it would already have been taking place. But one would expect and hope, perhaps, speaking as a Brazilian myself, as a Brazilian analyst, that this would be seen also as an opportunity, as a challenging moment, but as an opportunity to concert more actions, to act together in response to some of this challenging news from the United States.
Absolutely, you're right. President Trump had hit out at the BRICS as well, but what we are seeing right now is the BRICS nations being pushed further together. That being said, Brazil's president also spoke to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who's in touch with the Russian president as well. Do you think BRICS can jointly work to tackle Trump's tariffs, and how do you view Brazil's stance when it comes to US tariffs as well? How would you say Brazil is trying to navigate this?
It's not easy, as I just mentioned, and especially because the United States has a long history of favoring bilateral agreements, and that's exactly what President Trump is doing now, acting very strongly and promising to deal with each country individually. So it would be interesting to see if the countries in the BRICS could rise up to the challenge and act in a little more concerted effort. Doesn't mean they're going to necessarily only act together, that no longer they're going to be pursuing conversations individually with the United States, but that perhaps they could, have a little more of a unified front, to deal with these challenges from the United States. And this is a little bit what President Lula in Brazil has been trying to do. His government has signaled that he wants to continue to have dialogue with the United States. There are important people from the Brazilian government in the last few weeks in Washington negotiating exemptions from some of the tariffs. But also President Lula has signaled that this will not take place. And the willingness of Brazil to negotiate with the United States is not going to be at the cost of Brazilian sovereignty, because the decision from the United States about Brazil has a very strong political motivation as well, which we can talk if you want. So Brazil has at the same time working with the United States, but also signaling that he wants also to see take the opportunity to have a concerted effort with the BRICS nations and other countries in the South.
Absolutely. Now, of course, let's just also, that's about the BRICS nations. Let's also talk about the larger implications of the tariffs. How do you look at US tariffs affecting countries around the world? And do you think it's perhaps rebalancing global partnerships?
Well, it's really interesting, and let me start by saying, if I may, ironic that the main country that has been proposing free trade for the last 80 years, the United States of America, now is redesigning global trade and international order with a neo-mercantilist, protectionist, approach. So, of course, this is an interesting and challenging moment, especially also because of the style of the negotiation imposed from the United States under President Trump, which is very aggressive, is very also unpredictable, is very personalized. It depends on who he talks to, depending on the day he talks to that person. So things can be very unsettling. And so it is very challenging. And again, that's why I want to go back and see, they could be seen as an opportunity. But it is something that is attempting, at least, still a little bit too early to say how effective this will be in reorganizing global trade and the world order, to be a little more general. But it's a new moment that we see in the history of what in the last 30 years seemed to be sort of this globalized opening borders in the world. Now we're in a different phase of that, maybe deglobalizing a global economy. And so it's something that requires a lot of organization, a lot of political leadership and political will to navigate this challenging new time.
All right, Professor, thank you so much for joining us on World DNA with your insights on this.
My pleasure.